Lightning marriage into a stepmother. Chapter 1. I had a crush on James Miller for a long time. I followed him from our same high school to college and chased him all over the country. However, in the end, there was no result between us. My secret love died naturally. But he ended up becoming the CEO of our company. I secretly thought that this was my chance, but then I found out that he already had a 4-year-old child. The CEO who came out of nowhere is so handsome. With a boss like him, I wish I could work overtime with him every day. But it's a pity that he got divorced and brought a kid with him. When James arrived, the girls in the office were instantly excited. They talked about him every day, and I felt a little down. In the years that I chased after him, he got married, divorced, and even had a child, living quite an exciting life. And here I was, foolishly liking him for many years. This time, I finally gave up. On the weekend, my family arranged for me to go on a blind date. When I saw him sitting across from me, I felt like there was a bug in the world. And he only glanced at me and asked if I wanted to get married. Was he crazy? Why me? I asked him, covering my restless heart. Am I better than the Instagram models who wait for him downstairs every day? You have a more down-to-earth look, he answered decisively. Me. Thank you. I begged him not to insult me by saying that someone can be down-to-earth without being common. $200,000, he paused for a moment and said confidently, I'll give you $200,000 a year, we'll have a contractual marriage, and I won't interfere with your freedom. Why do you think $200,000? I didn't finish my sentence. Ding. $200,000 was transferred to my account through PayPal. I felt like he was insulting me. In theory, I should return the money and slap him in the face. But in reality, I'm 27 years old and life has taught me that you can't fight with money. If I had to choose between a man and his money, I knew myself well enough to choose the money. Besides, I really needed the money. Through gritted teeth, I said, okay. Chapter 2. He and I got married in a flash. We got our marriage certificate and completed the paperwork in less than an hour. He handed me a marriage agreement. All I needed to do was help him pick up his child after school, and play the role of a qualified stepmother. But there was one condition: we cannot publicly disclose our relationship, especially at work. I understood. He had hired me as a nanny, and all he needed was someone to take care of his child. A salary of $200,000 a year for being a nanny may not have been very satisfactory, but the idea of being close to a handsome man made it a bit more acceptable. On the first day of our marriage, he flew out of town for business. I have 2 villas, one in the east and one in the west. You can choose one. As he sat in the back seat of the car with a cold expression on his face, he said this to me before leaving. Do you want to give it to me? I was a little nervous. I had never seen a villa in my life. Is the property fee high? I'm afraid I won't be able to afford it. He turned his head and glanced at me. It's for you to live in. Oh, okay. I tried to ease the awkwardness with a few O's. Just to live in? I prefer the one in the west. I like standing by the panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows and watching the sunset. I said seriously. He looked at me but didn't say anything. Didn't want to give it to me? Then the one in the east is fine too. I whispered. The driver couldn't help but interject. The West Villa is just a name. It doesn't mean the sun actually sets in the west. You can also see the sunset from the East Villa. Oh my God. How embarrassing. I didn't say anything. The West Villa, it's closer to the company. He said, and gave me a key. When will you come back? I wanted to find a topic to ease the awkwardness, but I regretted it as soon as I spoke. We were only in a contractual marriage, which clearly stated that we would not interfere with each other's freedom. 1 week later, he answered without emotion. Seeing that I was speechless, he sighed, Don't wait for me. Oh, okay, understood. I replied. He looked at me again, his eyes seemed to be saying, You understand what you understand. Do your own thing and don't waste your time on me. He added. I was stunned, a flame of anger rising in my heart. I really felt like his words were unnecessary. Did he really think he, a second-hand man, was such a catch? Chapter 3. I was a bit nervous when I picked up my child from kindergarten for the first time. Daniel, your mom is here, the teacher said, looking me up and down. Daniel, a little boy with an Ultraman backpack, stood in front of me. He looked up at me calmly and said, "She's not my mom." The atmosphere became a bit awkward. I reached out to hold his hand, but he shook me off. "He may not be used to it yet," I said, trying to keep a smile on my face. "I know. Daniel looks exactly like you. How could he not be your son?" The teacher joked with me. "Exactly like me." I felt a bit nervous. "Noah, you're lying. Daniel clearly has a mom." "You said he doesn't have a mom," a little girl said, pulling a chubby boy toward us. "My mom said that's his stepmom," the chubby boy said, looking at me curiously before lowering his head, blushing. I was stunned for a second. I looked down at Daniel, who had a tight expression on his face and was walking ahead with his head down. When we got in the car, I asked him, "Daniel, are you hot? Do you want me to turn down the AC?" "I hate you," he said bluntly, leaving me speechless. Once we arrived at the supermarket, Daniel went crazy and bought so many toys and snacks that it filled an entire shopping cart. The driver told me that this was normal behavior for him. I sighed and thought to myself that he wasn't my child, so I couldn't do anything about it. That night, James wasn't home, so I called him to report how his child was doing. "Why is he angry?" he suddenly asked me after listening to my report. "I don't know, maybe his teacher said he looks like me and he thinks I'm not pretty. Every time I saw him in the rearview mirror, I noticed that he was staring at me, or rather, glaring at me." "You're not ugly," James said after a long silence. Then he added, "Don't worry about him." "Not ugly?" My heart trembled a little. Chapter 4. On the weekend, my colleague Ella invited me to go shopping at the mall. I thought it would be a good opportunity to buy some loose t-shirts for my mom, which would be more convenient for her to change into when she goes to the hospital. In the underground garage of the mall, there was a black Bentley parked near the elevator. The only reason I noticed it was because James also owned one. And then, it really was him. The car window was half open, and through it, I saw that there was a girl inside. At this moment, there was a feeling in my heart that I couldn't quite describe. Ella also noticed and nudged my arm, whispering, "It's the boss." So the two of us openly started to sneak a peek. "What else do you want?" James' voice was dry and cold, and his eyebrows and eyes were dyed black. "I don't want a bag, or a necklace. I want you." The little girl clung to his neck, almost hanging off of him. Just as Ella and I couldn't help but feel amazed at how bold and shameless young girls were nowadays. "I'm sorry." James took her hand down from around his neck. "Why? Don't you like me?" The little girl was getting a little frustrated. "I don't like people who don't listen." James pushed her away aloofly, tilting his head to signal her to get out. "I can listen." The little girl was completely panicked and tried to kiss him. Just then, James suddenly looked up and saw me. I was too busy watching the show and couldn't avoid his gaze, feeling so embarrassed that I couldn't even breathe. He looked at me for several seconds, his expression hard to discern. "Delete my contact information." He withdrew his gaze, looking down at the girl who wouldn't leave him alone, and his face suddenly darkened. "Stop being cheap." The girl couldn't take it anymore, grabbed her bag, and got off the car crying. Ella and I quickly pressed the elevator button, and as the elevator doors closed, I saw him sitting in the car, looking at me. I couldn't read the emotions in his eyes, whether he wanted to explain or was too disdainful to bother explaining. I believed it was the latter. Isabella, just now, wasn't that the TikTok influencer with 10 million followers who sat in the boss's car? I used to like her a lot. Ella was excited to show me the TikTok video. She's pretty. I took a glance and had to admit that James had good taste. I admired her so much, but she was fawning over our boss, disappointing. I chuckled lightly. There's nothing surprising about that. Money can make the world go crazy. So, does that mean our boss's wife will be an influencer? Will she have to come to the company every day to find the boss? Ella asked. Maybe, who knows? I stammered, not daring to speak out. Every time this happened, I had to recite the prenuptial agreement. Ella pulled me towards the second floor, sighing, "It's true. Nowadays, influencers marry rich businessmen." I didn't expect our boss, a man with wealth, looks, and charm, to also like influencers. Well, that influencer also benefits from it. She makes money by becoming a stepmom. I said. MHM. I had to agree with her. Just a heads up, you're still single. One day, I'll have my mom find a good partner for you. She paused for a moment and continued, for ordinary people like us, we can't even think about people like our boss. If we can find someone with a stable job and a good temper, it's like hitting the jackpot. Yeah, that's true. Just as we finished speaking, my phone rang. The contact name read, Overnight Millionaire. James. Who is it? Ella asked, smiling as she saw the nickname. My cousin. I signaled to her that I was going to answer the call. What time will you finish shopping? His voice was the same as before, deep and pleasant, causing my heart to beat unexpectedly faster. 5 o'clock. I heard the sound of a lighter on his end of the line, and he paused for a moment. Can you take a cab back by yourself? I need to drop someone off. Although it was a question, it sounded more like a request. Well, you take her. I was supposed to say hello, but I don't know why I added that last one. I said it like a jealous little woman, and it scared me. He paused again, as if to explain, I have a meeting tonight at the beach road. I understand. What to say there is a bureau, is to take the net red sister to go, or about another net red. My heart is sour, bloated. But when I think about it, we're just agreeing to marry, so what am I supposed to do? He said no more and hung up. The next second. Ding. PayPal to the account 20,000. I looked at the numbers on my phone and mused for a few seconds. So that's what he's talking about, being obedient and sensible. Obedient enough to look the other way when he's with another woman, sensible enough not to cry and not to be paid to be his paperman wife. If I'd known being good would make him so generous, I'd have been good for 24 hours. Chapter 5. A few days later, I took some time off work and headed to a rundown neighborhood in the north of the city. As soon as I stepped into the dilapidated red brick building, I saw several beer bottles scattered on the ground. You're drinking again? I felt a lump in my chest as I looked at her with a sigh. Who are you to tell me what to do? My mom threw a beer bottle at me, hitting my forehead and causing me pain. Ignoring the pain, I bent down to pick up the beer bottle and pulled her up from the bed. Have you had enough? If you have, let's go to the hospital, I said firmly. Every May, my mom would start drinking, and I knew it was because she missed my sister. I can't go. I don't have money, my mom replied, shaking me off and going to the bathroom to wash her face. I called a car for her and took her to the hospital. She looked at the bill and wanted to throw it in the garbage and walk away. I've got it, I showed her the balance on my phone. Are you dancing for money? My mom asked, her face changing suddenly. I was grateful for her loud voice, but the strange looks from others in the ward embarrassed me. Why can't I earn money that way? I asked her with a firm tone. She said, the hospital is a fraud. I am blessed that I will not die. I felt ashamed, but I knew why she acted this way. She cherished every penny since she wanted to live an elegant life, but life kept hitting her with challenges. After the surgery, you'd better find yourself a good man to marry. I'm tired of taking care of you, she suddenly said to me before we entered the operating room. It was the first time my mom spoke to me with such a deep tone that sounded like a farewell. I won't, I replied, feeling annoyed. You're impossible. She was furious. If you still want to fight with me, jump off the operation table after the surgery, I said irritably. Sitting on a bench outside the operating room, my heart felt confused. James was a blind date arranged by my grandmother. She said he was the grandson of one of my grandfather's war buddies and told me to meet him. She didn't know that James' family owned a company and was very wealthy. They might have just agreed to the meeting as a formality. As for our flash marriage, I didn't want to tell my mother about it. She would come up with some idea, and I knew it. I thought about the last thing my mom said to me before entering the operating room. You have a sister who is 2 years older than you named Sophia. She lives in London, England. If I don't make it out of this surgery, go see her for me. That was the first time I saw a photo of my sister. She was beautiful, wearing Gucci clothes, and carrying a Chanel bag. I sighed, amazed at how wealthy my unknown father was.